Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
Are you sure you want to know? That was the first thing I said into the phone. It was late, maybe past midnight, and my hand was wrapped so tightly around that old receiver, I heard the plastic creak. The voice on the other end reeked of whiskey and slurred intentions, so much so I could almost see his unsteady grin. He repeated himself, barked out a mocking laugh, asked if I was awake. I said nothing. I let him talk, let him brag, let him chuckle. I needed to hear every rasp of his drunk breath. A part of me was strangely calm. The rest was a rushing inferno I did my best to keep hidden behind a locked door in my mind. He mumbled something about my wife. Her lips, her hair, how she laughed at his jokes. And I just stood there, the telephone cord coiled around my wrist, my heart drumming in my ears. It was a strange moment, like waiting in a dark corridor, knowing the door at the end leads to something vile. I listened, because I had to, because I wanted to be sure. And now I'm going to tell you exactly how it felt. I first learned about her betrayal through a misplaced email, an idiotic slip of the finger on her part. You were wild on the couch. 4 words that changed everything. A glitch in her address book, a misdirect, a simple digital accident. And I ended up staring at my laptop screen, feeling my mind go completely blank. It was a Friday morning. I remember because the whole house smelled like coffee, and my son was babbling about some cartoon he wanted to watch. In the kitchen, she was bustling around as though it were any other day. Meanwhile, I was reading a note from her lover, describing how she made him lose his mind on our couch. Our couch. The one she and I picked out years ago, from a little furniture store on the corner when we first moved into this place. That couch where we once watched old detective movies on Sunday nights, where she'd lay her head on my lap after a rough day at work. Now I couldn't look at it without imagining them. Limbs tangled, his hands on her in the place that used to feel like home for me. So I sat there, scanning that damned sentence again and again until my eyes burned. I felt a swarm of emotions, shock, confusion, raw betrayal. But I forced myself to keep still. That email was a bullet, and it shot me clean through the chest. I didn't say a word to her about it, not at first. I suppose it was partly denial, partly an instinctual need for self-control. Maybe I was too blindsided to respond like a normal man. Some men would have flipped the table. Some men would have shouted, demanded answers. But I grew cold. It's hard to describe, but there was an Arctic wave that coursed through me when I realized that everything I believed about my marriage might be a lie. Instead of confronting her, I let the day pass as though nothing happened. I nodded at her small talk, gave my usual half-smile, even found the strength to pat her on the shoulder when she mentioned she was going out to run errands. Later that evening, when she got home, I did something that still surprises me. I gave her a massage. I used warm oil, the kind with lavender she liked so much. She purred contentedly, stretching under my palms on the bed, and I remember the lamplight catching the shine on her bare shoulders. Her hair smelled like coconut shampoo, just the way it always had. She was so relaxed, eyes half closed, humming some soft tune. This woman beneath my hands, the woman I'd once cherished as though she were the only star in my sky. And I leaned down and whispered, "Your thanks won't be necessary." Then I stood, turned off the lamp, and walked out, leaving her on the bed in the dark. If she was puzzled by my behavior, she didn't show it. Or maybe she was too lost in the moment to wonder why her husband had just uttered something so foreboding. I slept in the basement that night, didn't say a word, didn't speak to her in the morning, either, other than a stiff nod over coffee. She seemed to sense something off, but I guess she was hoping I was just moody or stressed from work. She tried to act normal, chattering about a new yoga studio she wanted to visit, but my responses were monosyllabic grunts. Underneath, I was replaying that single line. You were wild on the couch. Wild. On my couch. Every time I pictured it, my stomach churned. It took me 2 full days to collect myself enough to order a DNA test for our son. I was slow and methodical, logging on to that website that promised quick results, selecting the kit, filling out my details, shipping it in discreet packaging, so she wouldn't suspect anything. Part of me didn't want to believe there was any chance he wasn't mine, but another part was quietly screaming that I'd better face the whole truth while I could. The results came a couple of weeks later. I read them alone in my parked car, feeling the ridges of the sealed envelope under my fingertips as I steeled myself to open it. I can't describe the exact second my heart broke. It wasn't a bang, more like a slow, cracking sound inside my head, as though the invisible scaffolding holding my life together was giving way. I felt my breath seize, and my tongue went dry. The words on the page told me exactly what I feared. The boy I'd been raising, the one whose tears I soothed, and whose little league games I attended, he wasn't mine. Some other man's blood flowed in his veins, a man who'd brag about her in a drunken phone call later, telling me all the dirty details I never wanted to know. After reading those lab results, I stuffed them into my jacket pocket. Then I just sat there in the driver's seat, staring at the steering wheel. People moved around me, going about their daily chores in the parking lot of the post office. Some were talking on phones, some carried groceries. The bright sun overhead mocked me with its normalcy. It felt like the entire world was in color while my vision turned gray. My son wasn't my son. My marriage was a sham. Everything was a hollow joke. I didn't cry. There was a heaviness in my throat, but tears never came. Instead, I felt cold. That was the day I decided I wouldn't go to the police, wouldn't pick a fight with the man I now thought of as a yoga-obsessed peacock. Why waste time swinging fists when I had a better way? He had a history, you see. I knew it because I did some digging, called in a few favors, traced back his real name, the places he'd worked, the people he'd swindled. He was the type who borrowed money and forgot to return it, the type who made enemies, and I found every single one. An old investor he ripped off in Florida, a debt club he never repaid, plus a guy with scars across his face who'd been searching for him for months. I didn't have to do much to stir them up. Just a few anonymous messages, a handful of forwarded addresses, an old rumor or two, a nudge in the right direction, and a supply of certain materials that would set them off with just enough fury to see this through. Then I waited. My wife, oblivious to all this, was living under the same roof as I was, and we barely spoke. She'd attempt to open conversation sometimes. "We need to talk. You've been so distant." But I'd brush her aside. She tried once to raise her voice, demanded to know what had changed in me. I gave her nothing but a blank stare. Funny thing is that silence must have gotten to her even more than any shouting match might have done. I guess coldness is sometimes stronger than any slap or scream. She cried a few times. I heard her sobbing in the bathroom late at night, but I didn't comfort her. I stayed in the basement, curled up on that creaking old cot, thinking about how I was going to watch everything unravel for her lover, and how I no longer cared about the consequences. Days blended into one another until the phone rang again at late night. The man's voice was thick with booze. My guess is he was just careless, or maybe he got my number from her phone. He started by calling me by my first name, taunting me, bragging, and I told him what I told you. "Are you sure you want to know?" He laughed, told me that a little man like me didn't scare him. Then he boasted about how well he knew my wife's body, like he was delivering a set of bullet points on a conquest. That's when I clenched my jaw so tight I felt my teeth grind. The heat in my veins roared, but I forced my voice to stay calm, because I knew what was coming. I'd put everything in motion already. Even if I wanted to stop it, I couldn't. The men who came for him were professionals in their own way. They didn't kick down doors in broad daylight or cause a public scene. One day he was smug, strutting around in neon workout gear, probably scheduling private yoga sessions in between spouting nonsense about spiritual alignment. The next day, he was gone. Just like that. I later heard from one of my sources how they cornered him. One of them, the man with the scared face, recognized him instantly. He used to owe me a chunk of money, I was told. The rest was done in a quiet, methodical manner. No big fuss, no swirling police sirens, just a sudden, punishing payback. They took their time, from what I could gather. They left him battered, humiliated, a ghost of the flamboyant person he used to be. I never lifted a finger on him myself, but I'm no fool. I know my hands are dirty. I lit the fuse after all. That's on me. And I could have felt guilty, maybe, if I hadn't remembered how he crowed about her. If I hadn't seen that line in the email over and over in my nightmares. Wild on the couch. If I didn't remember how he smirked through the phone, as if he was a king and I was nothing. My wife must have sensed something was up because, soon after he vanished, her entire demeanor changed. She got skittish, restless. She'd stare at me with those big eyes, searching my face for answers. I gave her silence. She tried to shout at me once, and I let her. She hurled insults, cursed, demanded that I speak. I stood there, folded my arms, and watched the flush rise on her cheeks. The only thing I managed to say was, "I know everything." That shut her up. She must have realized I had found out about the affair. Maybe she sensed something darker under the surface, too. Within a month, she was gone from the house. Moved to some small apartment in Lille. She took our boy. Her boy. With her. My boy in name only, though in my heart there was still a pang because I had raised him. She didn't scream for child support at first. Maybe guilt kept her quiet. Or maybe she just wanted to get away from me. I let it happen. I wanted that space, that empty hallway, those quiet rooms free of her presence. Because every time I caught the scent of her perfume, I saw her in my mind, moaning for him on that couch. It was an image I couldn't bear anymore. A few weeks later, I saw a photo on social media. My wife smiling at the camera, her face turned toward the golden LA sunset, the boy by her side. She looked radiant, hair shining, wearing some sort of sleek dress that showed off her figure. A new start for her, presumably. The caption read something like, "New beginnings in the City of Angels." Anyone else looking at it might see a carefree woman embracing life. But all I saw was the empty hollowness behind her eyes. A forced grin stretched across her lips, but I recognized the tension in it. There was no soul in that smile. She was going through the motions, same as me, trying to pretend there was still something worth salvaging in her life. I found myself staring at that photo for a long time, thinking about how, once upon a time, she had been my entire universe, and how her betrayal had turned everything into ash. I recalled the day we bought that couch, how excited we were to create our little nest in a new house. I remembered the shape of her face when we exchanged vows, the tremor in her voice when she said she'd love me forever. And now, looking at that digital snapshot, I realized what she used to be. My anchor no longer existed. Maybe she was still breathing, but what made her spirit unique was gone. The betrayal had killed something in both of us, something we'd never get back. We never had a formal divorce settlement. We just drifted apart, like two broken pieces of driftwood going in separate directions. She wrote me a note, handwritten, scrawling letters on a plain sheet of paper, apologizing for the pain she caused, but also claiming she felt unfulfilled and that I had neglected her emotional needs. I read it once, snorted at the hypocrisy, and fed it to the fireplace. Her words didn't matter. Her excuses meant nothing after what she did, after I found out our son wasn't mine. She could blame me, blame stress, blame the universe, but in the end, she chose to break every vow she ever made. The only time I felt something close to sadness was when I tried to clean out the house. I made myself walk through every room with a box, tossing pictures, mementos, little bits and pieces of our life together. At one point, I found a small baby onesie that belonged to my son. I froze, the memory of how excited I'd been the day he was born crashing into my chest. I remembered the flutter of joy, the tears, The way I felt like I finally had something real in this world. Now that memory felt like a punch in the gut. Because all that love was built on a lie. I held the onesie for a few minutes, realized my hands were shaking, and then stuffed it into the box. I couldn't throw it out, couldn't keep it, didn't know what to do with it. It just lay there, a silent testament to what I'd lost. But there's a certain emptiness in me now, a numb space where my heart used to be. The only time it warms up is when I think about the day they found him. Her lover, that slick yoga peacock, crumpled somewhere in a quiet alley. Word was he had multiple bruises, a broken rib, and a face so battered that no amount of spiritual posturing could fix. He vanished from her life after that. She might not even know exactly what happened to him. And I wonder if she suspects I had a hand in it. Perhaps she has nightmares about it. She can go on smiling in photos, but somewhere deep down, she probably senses the ice in my veins. The coldness that took root the moment I read that damned email. People might think I got my revenge. But to be honest, it doesn't feel like triumph. There's no real victory in any of this, just an absence of everything that once mattered. If life is a puzzle, then I shattered the board rather than solve it. But that's the path I chose. She tore my heart out, and in response, I lit a match and burned every bridge. Some folks might call that monstrous. Others might say it's a deserved punishment. I don't care either way. Life doesn't always dole out justice the way we want. It's messy, it's cruel. And if you're not willing to stand up for yourself, you get trampled. I refuse to be trampled. I still keep that basement room as my bedroom, though. I can't bring myself to sleep in the master bedroom, where we once shared intimacy. Sometimes I remember her shape in the darkness, the warm curve of her hips, the quiet sigh of her breath. It's a ghost that lingers in the walls. So I avoid it, keep my distance, confine myself to the underside of the house like a man in exile. There's a battered old chair down there where I sit, swirling a glass of cheap whiskey, telling myself I'm content with the silence. Maybe it's a twisted kind of penance, or maybe I just need the reminder of what happens when you trust someone too much. I look in the mirror some mornings and I see lines on my face that I never noticed before. I see a hardness in my eyes. I used to be a man who believed in simple values. Work hard, love your family, stay honest. Now I'm a man who orchestrated a quiet act of violence, and I feel no regret. That's the worst part, maybe, or the best, depending on how you look at it. Eventually, I got a follow-up email from the DNA testing company, some customer satisfaction nonsense, as if they wanted to know how my experience was. How was my experience? I nearly wrote them a message saying that their test destroyed my life, that it ripped the ground from under my feet. But what was the point? The truth was always going to come out. I would have found a way to face it one day. So I closed the email without responding, left it in the digital trash can, and moved on. Time passed. I had to keep working, pay the bills, respond to everyday demands. It's odd how life doesn't stop or even slow down. The world keeps churning. The mailman keeps delivering junk mail. The neighbors keep mowing their lawns. The bank keeps sending statements. My day job is logistics planning for a transportation firm, so I bury myself in spreadsheets, calls, schedules. I let my coworkers think I'm just quiet and overworked. They don't ask too many questions, thank God. And so I limp along, day after day, existing in this hush of bitterness. She hasn't tried to reconcile or come crawling back with apologies. Part of me respects that in a twisted way. At least she isn't humiliating us, both by acting like we can fix this. Another part of me hates her for not trying. There's a side of me that might have taken sick pleasure in watching her beg for my forgiveness. Maybe I would have turned her away with the same coldness she handed me. But that scenario never came to pass. We exist now as two strangers whose only tie is a boy she bore with another man. And the boy, well, that's the hardest knot to untangle. I can't just flip a switch and erase the bond we had, the paternal feelings I once held. But every time I consider seeing him, My chest seizes with a mixture of grief and rage, and I find myself paralyzed. I hate the man whose genes run in that child's veins. But the child himself is innocent, isn't he? I'm torn between wanting to protect myself from more heartbreak and the nagging sense that he's just a kid caught in the middle of this adult nightmare. So far, I've stayed away, told myself it's best for him if I vanish. No half measures, no illusions. Maybe that's a coward's route, or maybe it's my way of making sure I don't put him through more confusion. I honestly don't know. Sometimes I dream about walking along a dimly lit corridor that stretches on and on. No doors, no windows. Just me, the hush of my footsteps, and a faint echo like dripping water. In that dream, I know I'm searching for something, but I don't know what. Every time I reach the end, I find a locked door. I knock, but nobody answers. Then I wake up, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. No matter how many times I have that dream, I never figure out what's behind that door. I guess it's a metaphor for the life I thought I had. The wife, the child, the future, and how I can't get it back. Occasionally, I'll get glimpses of her new life on social media or through mutual acquaintances. She's doing private yoga sessions again, living near the coast, posting cheerful pictures that feel like paper-thin illusions. She pretends, and maybe that's how she copes. Meanwhile, I pretend everything is fine when I'm at the office. I pretend I'm just another guy living his routine, telling polite lies at the water cooler. Things are good, can't complain, I'll say with a shrug. But inside, I'm a desert, scorched and barren, with only the memory of that single email etched into the sand. Now you might be wondering if I found someone else. Try to move on romantically. The answer is no. Not because I couldn't, I suppose, but because every time I imagine letting another woman into my life, I see that couch. I see the mental image of her with him, and it sours any flicker of trust I might muster. I'm too raw, too cynical now, and, ironically, maybe too comfortable in this quiet misery. It's become my norm, my refuge. I survive it by not feeling too much, by keeping myself numb. I think of revenge as a living thing. It fed on my anger and gave me a twisted sense of purpose when I needed it. Now that it's done, it left me hollow. The man who took her from me paid a steep price, and I can't even say I felt glee. It was more like ticking a box on a checklist. He got what he deserved. My turn to exhale. End of story. Except the story keeps dragging on, because that's how life works. For a moment, let's talk about that day they took him. It wasn't a typical kidnapping or anything so dramatic. They simply cornered him after a late-night shift at the gym or wherever he was teaching. A friend of a friend let me know that the man with the scarred face was particularly eager to have a word with him. They put him in a car, drove someplace secluded, and taught him a lesson. I don't have the gory details, nor do I want them. All I know is that the next morning, a battered version of him was dumped back onto the street, missing some possessions, sporting bruises in places that must have hurt like hell. He disappeared from the city soon after. Perhaps he crawled back to Florida or found a hole to hide in. And that was that. I sometimes replay the phone call in my mind. That moment he was slurring his words, telling me about how she tasted, how she moved. I remember how my hand was shaking, how the phone cord twisted in my grip, how I wanted to smash the phone into the wall. I didn't. Instead, I let him talk, let him bury himself under my silent rage, because I knew, in a matter of hours, everything would shift under his feet. Looking back, it feels almost surreal, like a scene from a movie. But it was real enough. What does that say about me? That I'm a man who can orchestrate something so vicious and walk away without regret. Maybe it says I'm not the man I used to be. Maybe betrayal has the power to kill entire parts of your morality. Once you realize your own life was a fraud, maybe the lines between right and wrong blur until you don't care anymore. A few nights ago, I woke up on the basement cot, my heart pounding like a hammer. I had dreamed I was back in the living room. Only this time I was the one on the couch. pinned under some crushing weight I couldn't see. I tried to call out her name, but no sound came from my mouth. I could smell lavender oil, hear the soft hum of the AC unit, just like real life. Then, in the dream, she walked in with our boy, and they both looked at me with blank faces. That's when I jolted awake. My t-shirt was drenched in sweat, and for a moment, I couldn't tell if it was real or not. The basement was quiet. The only light was the digital glow from the old clock on the tool bench. It read 3:14 a.m. I sat up, pressed my palms to my eyes, and let the darkness settle back into my mind. People say time heals all wounds, but I've come to realize that's not entirely true. Time can dull the pain, sure, maybe lighten it a bit so you can function, but it doesn't erase the scar. And sometimes the scar itches like it's fresh, reminding you that you'll never be the same. I expect to carry this bitterness for the rest of my days. Maybe one day I'll be older, maybe my joints will ache and my hair will gray, and I'll look back on this entire nightmare and feel something like regret. Or maybe I'll justify it all even then, tell myself there was no other way. If you are still here, listening to this, it means you wanted to know. You wanted the truth, or some approximation of it. Maybe you expected drama, some explosive confrontation, a big moral lesson. Life doesn't always work that way. Sometimes the confrontation happens in a quiet basement. Sometimes the lesson is just a dull, throbbing ache in your gut that never fades. But if you asked me if I'd do it all over again, if I'd set those men on him, if I'd unearth every dirty secret from his past, just to see him knocked down, I'd say yes, without hesitation. Do I feel shame? Maybe in some corner of my soul, there's a whisper of it. But every time I try to face that feeling, I recall how she moaned his name on our couch. I recall that she bore his child under the pretense that it was mine. I recall that single line from the email, "You were wild on the couch." And my shame fades, replaced by that same cold fury that fueled me in the first place. Life goes on, they say. She has her new life in Lay the boy. My boy who's not my boy will grow up surrounded by palm trees and sunshine. Maybe he'll never know how close I was to being his father in every sense that matters. Maybe he'll never know the bullet I took when I realized he wasn't mine. Maybe that's for the best. Let him live a life free of this ugliness. As for me, I'll keep my distance. The man I am now is not cut out to raise a child. Not after all that's happened. If I tried, I'd only teach him bitterness and resentment. That's no gift to a kid. I guess that's the final note to this story. A quiet acceptance of how twisted everything has become. I'm no hero. She's not a princess. He was never just a harmless yoga instructor. We're all flawed, broken, and maybe that's just the nature of being human. But I won't pretend to see her as a victim, and I won't let her see me as some gullible fool she can manipulate any longer. The lines are drawn, the damage is done, and the curtain is down. So, that's it. That's the reality of what happened. I won't sugarcoat it, and I won't bother defending myself to you or anyone else. If you wanted a tidy bow to wrap it all up, there isn't one. There's just a man alone in a basement, a woman forging a hollow smile in a new city, and a child who might never learn the full story of his parentage. The lover, broken by men he once cheated and betrayed, has disappeared into the shadows, licking his wounds, or maybe plotting another scheme. And me. I'm here in the silence, a whiskey glass in hand, remembering how it all burned. The faint smell of lavender oil still haunts my nostrils, reminding me of the night I gave her that last massage before I slipped away into the dark. You asked if I was sure I wanted to know. Well, I did. And look where it got me. The truth has teeth, my friend, and it doesn't let go.